Yep. So the proposition is just whether or not God exists. I'll be taking the position that God exists, and agents, you're going to be taking the negation. So to be clear in a couple of things, do you take it to be the case that are like a strong atheist, or like what? Like what type of atheist are you?
Yeah, I guess I'm not really a strong atheist. I think there's a collection of God concepts, and I reject like classical theism. Um, Maybe if you define it, God as like the universe or something, I wouldn't be an atheist because I think there's a universe, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I reject classical theism.
Okay, so well, here's my definition of God, right? So like my definition of God is simply an omnipotent, omniscient being exists, right? So I can just give the argument for why an omnipotent being exists, and then establish
But I'm
why
sorry,
this
you like
omnipotent.
what was God?
I define God to be
You
an
cut out for a
omnipotent,
second.
omniscient being. Am I still bugging out?
No, you're good. Yeah.
Okay, so saying that like my definition of God is an omnipotent, omniscient being that exists. Right? So like I can just cash out omnipotence, just having maximal causal power.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you were to have maximal causal power, then by definition you'd be the first cause, because if it was to be the case that there's like a being of the causal chain which comes before that being, or rather causally precedes said object, it would be the case that such a being would actually have more causal power than the being that's been talked about. So by definition, God would be the first cause.
Okay. Um,
Okay.
I don't think
No,
God causes everything, right?
no, I think God causes everything.
Um, okay. Like indirectly, or
Yeah.
okay, I see.
I don't
All
know
right.
how you're going to be cashing out the distinction between direct versus indirect causation, but I think God is the formal cause of all things, because God is going to be a being that transcends a space-time dimensionality. So, yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah. So
Bro,
the
you
whole idea is
fucking
just
suck
simply,
at
well,
masturbating, you stupid nigger. Nigger,
I
nigger,
don't know why the
nigger.
Black Spook is talking, but not only can he just get banned from the server, actually, I won't ban him from the server. But let's see if he's still on PC. Okay, he left. So continue with what you're saying, by the way.
No, I mean it was cleared up.
Okay, yeah, cool. So, by my definition, God would be the first cause if he's omnipotent, and if he's omnipotent, he's the first cause, and if he's the first cause, then he's omnipotent. This, given my definition of omnipotence.
If wait, sorry, you said that there's a biconditional, so if you're the first cause, then you're
Yeah,
also omnipotent.
yeah,
Um, yeah, sure.
yeah, sure. So the whole idea is simply, well, you'd agree that minds exist, correct?
Yeah,
And you also agree that like thoughts and imaginations exist, right?
yeah.
Okay. So the argument just simply goes like this, right? So for anything X, it's either mind dependent or mind independent. That's just true via the LEM. Do you grant the first premise?
Yeah, I'm just gonna write the whole argument down and I'll give my thoughts after you
Okay.
finish.
Well, I'm going to just continue the argument once you establish whether or not you agree with the first premise, right? That's just like a starting point for the whole argumentation.
Okay, this is just a prerequisite of the argument, or
Yeah, kind of. It's like the first premise of the argument. It's not like formalized or anything. I'm just listing the premises type shit. So I'm like asking you, like, do you agree that like for anything X, like anything which is, and by thing I'm just defining a thing to be a term with semantic content, right? So for anything X, would you agree that it is either mind dependent or mind independent?
yeah,
Okay, so considering you agree with this, right? Then that means you'd also agree that God is a thing, right? It's a term with semantic content which either refers to a mind-dependent object or a mind-independent object, right?
it. Yeah, I mean, well, I guess just how are you cashing out reference?
Reference, I'm just talking about like the type of thing which refers to something, right? So like a thing is mind-dependent if that thing refers to some imagination or something within the mind. A thing is mind independent if it not only refers to something within the mind, which is like the semantical content, but it also has an external it also has like an external world counterpart insofar as there's something which instantiates the concept in the external world, right? So those are the conditions for something to be independent and mind independence, respectively.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I guess by reference, I just want to make sure. I don't have a theory of reference, but are you not like saying anything controversial? Just what the average person means when they're
No,
talking about how a
just like
term
what
refers to
people would
something?
like colloquially when they're talking about, like, I'm
Okay,
referring to this thing. Yeah. So you'd agree that,
okay,
like, for
sure.
anything that is mind is your mind independent, and you'd also agree that God is a thing, correct?
God is a thing.
Yeah. So God has a semantic reference, or sorry, a semantic content.
Unless
God has
I'm
semantic content.
right, yeah. Oh, are you just
Yeah,
asking me if
it's
the
a thing.
term
It has
God
semantic
refers?
content.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously.
sure.
Now, if it was to be the case that God was to be mind dependent, like an imagination or just mere fiction, then there's a logical contradiction, right? The logical contradiction being that if God was to be mind dependent, then that means God is caused by minds. But that means it would contradict God's definition, which is him being the first cause, or him being omnipotent, which entails him being the first cause. We both agreed that omnipotence entails first causality, or being the first cause of the things of the causal chain, and vice versa. So that means God cannot be a fictional object
Right.
or just a mere imagination or thought or anything. So that results in the second horn of the dichotomy, that he's mind independent. And so that means God exists. There you go.
Okay, wait. Okay, so
Yeah.
right, so
So
you said that God is mind dependent, right? And you meant by
yeah,
that
because
God doesn't
that
refer to
option entails
something
a
in the mind.
contradiction. Yeah.
Right.
So that
Well, that's
means
just
God
because
has
you
to be the
define
type of
God,
thing which
right?
refers to something objectively. Yeah, of course. We
Yeah,
both
so
agreed that the
God
definition, and you agreed
refers
that
to.
first cause entails, being omnipotent and vice versa. So yeah.
Okay, so wait, I guess I'm just a little confused. Do you think it follows from God refers to something mind independent to God exists?
Yeah. Just like how, for example, if the term, like if I say, for example, like agent. So agent is this thing with semantic content, your thing, right? You could say
Sure.
agent is, you can have like multiple different definitions of agent, the person, like the things which makes agent, right? And so that thing either is mind dependent, like just a mere fiction, or it's mind independent. If you're mind
Uh-huh.
independent, that means that that thing refers to an object which satisfies the concept of being agent. So it just trivially entails that you
Okay.
exist objectively. Yeah. If you're mind independent, you have to
Okay. Well, I
exist,
guess I'm
because what it
just
means for
so I
something to
guess
be
I'm
mind
un,
independent is for it to exist objectively.
yeah, I guess I'm just confused on how it follows from. So okay, so God refers to something mind independent and refers to anything like complicated, or you're not adopting any theory of reference
No,
that's
we've already talked
specifically
about this.
weird,
If God
right?
refers to something
Okay.
mind independent, then that means God is a mind independent thing. And what it means for, you can't have a mind independent thing which does not exist. That's a contradiction. What it means for something to be mind independent is for it to exist in objective reality. So granting that you agree that God could not be mind dependent given the definition of God, then you'd
Uh-huh.
have to agree that God is mind independent given the fact you agreed that the first premise is true, which is that for anything X is either mind dependent or mind independent. So
Right, but
you
you
kind of like
understand that it
automatically
doesn't.
can see the proposition. What's up?
Or so you understand that it doesn't follow from referring to something mind independent that the mind independent, right? Unless refers just
If
means
something is mind independent,
it's
what's
referring
your
to.
definition of mind independent?
Um, some X is mind independent when X is not located spatially in the mind, or I don't know, thought of or something.
So it exists objectively, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, the term bachelor, right? You'd agree that this is not a fictional concept, right? Like it's something which actually exists, right? Like there are people in the world which satisfies the concept of being a bachelor. You'd agree with this, right?
Yeah, there's people that are bachelors, right?
So that means a bachelor, at least, right? Like that specifically, in multiple different cases, would be a mind independent thing, given the objects which satisfies the concept.
Okay, so right, so you can refer to a bachelor,
Yes or
and
no?
there
You'd
is a
agree with this,
bachelor.
right?
Well, I'm just restating what you're saying. I agree with that. Just that I'm getting it right. So there does exist a
Okay.
bachelor. So when people refer to a specific bachelor, they're correct.
I'm not even going to that part yet. I'm saying that, like, if you agree, if you grant the
Okay.
proposition that the thing bachelor, right, refers to something out there then it entails the proposition that there's at least one bachelor.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't really see that inference. Yeah. Here, I
You
can
don't think it is the
actually lay it
case
out
that
with an
if something,
example. Well,
well, it just
just real
follows
quick,
from even your
so
own
that you can
conception, right?
understand. Sorry.
Sure.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
it follows from
So
your own
if
conception, right? You
I
define the, hold on, real quickly.
uh
You define the mind-independent thing to be the type of thing which exists objectively, and you also said specifically that it is the case that a thing which is mind-independent would be referring to something out there which instantiates it. So it trivially follows from your own agreements that it would be the case that if something refers to something else in the world, then there is something in the world which satisfies the concepts. It does make it a thing in objective existence. Same logic applies here. You agree that God, which is a
huh.
thing, refers to something out there, which is why you agree that he's mind independent as an object. And so it trivially follows that
Right.
there's a thing out there in the world which satisfies the God concept. So that would just trivially entail that God exists objectively given your own concessions.
So is mind? So okay. Just to be clear, is mind independent something that's defined as an existent? Like you're just defining something that's mind independent if it's existing.
You said what?
Something is mind dependent if were it to, or sorry, not were to it exist. A mind independent thing is something that both exists and is objective.
Oh,
Because
sorry,
then
I
I
was
might have
like
a
listening to
problem with.
something. What are you saying?
I'm
hmm
asking, mind independent just defined as something that both exists and is objective?
What it means for something to be objective is for it to include the property of existence, like it exists.
Okay, so something is objective if it exists,
Not just if it exists, but if it exists in the
right?
sense where it is not dependent on mind.
And yeah, right, and it's not dependent on mind. Well, okay, so then you define objective that exists. Yeah, well, okay, but then you could do this for like anything, right? So if I cash out a
No, you
unicorn as
can't.
something with, sure you can. If I get a unicorn as something with conditions like it's a horse, it's pink, it's magic, and it's got a horn, right? And then that refers to something. And if a unicorn were to exist, it would be mind independent. That has nothing to do with like your thoughts or anything. And the term does refer, and referring does not entail it exists, um, unless you think it does.
I
Then
think it
you
does,
could
yeah.
use the same line of reasoning. Okay, so
No,
right,
because
okay, so it's referring.
just because referring, or just because something being a thing entails it existent, it doesn't mean it entails it objectively existent. So unicorns exist, but not as an objective existence. It's just fiction. So it exists as a mere imagination.
Okay, so right, so you think that reference
Yeah.
means that something exists? Okay,
Yeah, I'm an anti-Meinongian. I reject Meinongianism.
right. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess just why I think that God refers now, and that definition of reference, or I guess that condition reference. Sorry.
Yeah, but even if it is the case, like Gadfaint is saying, like a better definition of objective, which is stance independent, the argument still goes through, regardless of whether you're talking about stance independence or mind independence, right? But just to address your point, really, agent, I'm saying specifically that the unicorn example doesn't work, right? Like the idea of there being this sort of like if you say, for example, a unicorn is this sort of like object with a horn, like a horse with a horn, for example, who can fly or whatever like that. That
Right.
definition specifically does not entail that it exists objectively. It exists, but not objectively, because there's a possibility it could be mind dependent. It doesn't follow from the definition of a unicorn that it cannot be mind dependent. However, it follows from the definition of God that it could not be mind dependent. So that's not a possibility.
Well, surely horses. If I define it as a horse-like creature that's magical and has a horn, none of that means that it's mind dependent, right?
I agree, but it doesn't mean it's mind independent.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
if
so
if
that
there was
means
a
you cannot. That
creature
means the
that looks,
unicorn example doesn't work, right?
if there was a, well, no, I mean it doesn't entail like a horse-like creature. A creature is not a mind-dependent thing. It is a mind-independent thing, like horses or um,
That's not true
frogs,
by
whatever.
definition. You have mythological creatures which exist, right? What are you talking about?
And mythological creatures. Well, yeah, but those,
A goblin is
but
a
then those
creature, but it's mythological.
surely mythological means that it's like in the definition it would be
Exactly.
mind dependent, but not in
So
the
that means
case of
you're
a unicorn.
wrong.
Yeah, I
Why
guess I
would it
just don't
not be
really
the case
understand.
for the unicorn? Why would that
Because
not
if
be
you
the case in
define
case we
it,
get
if you
to it?
define the unicorn as something that's mind independent, and then I say that unicorn refers, then the same logic would follow. I was understanding the argument because
No, saying that
referring, if
something
I
is mind independent or mind dependent is not something which would
uh
be a semantical condition. It would be a claim about the world, right? So that's just going to be like a metaphysical claim. So, for example, I'll just give like one example, right? So, like, if I say, for example, this guy exists objectively, right? Like, for example, John exists objectively. It is not the case that objective existence or subjective existence is going to be a semantical property. That's going to be a claim which you derive based off the facts about the concept and the empirical world, for example, right?
right.
So you just committed in the category error. Like you're just basically committed in the category error when you're going to be saying that. And
Well, I
also in the
guess.
case of the what's up? Mm-hmm. Go for it.
Well, no, I guess just so you're trying to infer from God's properties as the definition to something this, but there's no. Is there empirical work going on there as well?
No, I never said empirical works is the only condition for it to basically make metaphysical claims. You can make metaphysical claims about
Uh,
what exists objectively without it being something which is grounded empirically.
okay. Can you just define it as something that exists?
I'm not defining God as something that exists. I'm saying, given the concepts of, given like my meta ontology or my formal ontology, and given what the thing actually is,
Uh,
for anything X, it exists. But it doesn't have to exist objectively, it can exist in the fictional sense.
okay. So I guess how are you jumping? So okay, that formal ontology is fine. How are you jumping from that, right? And then God is defined as something with the additions to this, the reference, and then yeah, I mean we have to go back to that.
Because there's a contradiction entailed from God. So you granted my formal ontology. So that means it is not the case that you could have a non-existent. When people say that something does not exist, what they really mean there is that it exists, but as my imagination. It doesn't exist as a part of the objective world. Because if you ask the average
Mhm.
person if imaginations exist, they would say yes, but it exists, but only in my head. Right? So the argument
Right.
is simply that considering that God necessarily does not exist, and for anything X, it necessarily does not exist. The form of existence it does in fact have would either be the type of existence which is imaginary or non-imaginary. I'm telling
Right.
you that given the definition of God we both signed off on, it could not be an imaginary existence. There's a contradiction there. Kind of like, for example, if I say that, oh, the definition of a bachelor is an old man, however, I could have this married person who is a bachelor. All right, there's a contradiction given the definition of a bachelor, which entails an incompatibility. Right, so you can like derive facts about the objective reality based off definitions. Right, so you can start off by saying, oh, this is the definition of this word, and given this set of empirical facts about this given object that's been assessed metaphysically, it is not the case that this object can be classified under that specific terminology or the specific classification of objects, right? So
Right. Okay. So I guess so. Just to be clear, before you said that the contradiction in God being mind dependent was that the definition of God was maximally causal. Is that right?
yeah, I'm saying that like given the agreements you made, it literally entails that God exists.
It entail. Okay. Yeah. I guess I'm just unclear on the inference. Then is there like a do you have a formal version of the argument, or is it all informal?
It's all informal. I don't see why the formalization matters. All
Because
of
I
the
don't see how it
propositions you agreed
entails.
on, you do not see how you conceded the entire proposition already. I can just walk you through it again, right? So you said my formal ontology is fine. You agreed on that. You agreed with my formal ontology. My formal ontology rejects
Okay.
non-existent things being a possibility. That means once you're a thing, you exist. Okay, you agreed on this. You also agreed it to be the case that anything X is either mind dependent or mind independent. Then you agreed that there's a logical contradiction from God being mind dependent. So disjunctive elimination entails that God exists objectively. Base finished.
Okay. Just okay. So right. Premise one was for any x is mind independent or mind dependent. Right.
Yeah, you consider that
Is that right?
proposition. You agreed on that already, like a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
And then I established the logical contradiction from God being mind dependent, right? Which you've also
Okay.
agreed on.
God
So then
is
that entails that
mind.
God is mind independent, considering that the first premise is a true disjunctive.
Okay. I guess just walk me through. So, is the contradiction to do with reference? God refers to something that is defined as something that's not mind dependent. Is that right?
No, the contradiction is just that the definition of God entails God being the first cause. We both agreed on that, so it's signed off on that proposition. And so if you're the first cause, you cannot be mind dependent. Because if you're mind dependent, then that means you're caused and created by minds. Imaginations are created by minds, beliefs, desires. All of these things are caused by minds into existence.
Right. Okay. So God. Okay. God. The term God is something that's the first cause. Okay. If you're the first cause, then it's something that's mind dependent. Okay. Right.
Yeah, so the first premise about it being the case that for anything it's either mind dependence or mind independence, that's just logically necessarily true given the third law of logic, right? So once that disjunct is sure, then it is the case that if P is false, then not P is true. And we know P is false necessarily, so not P is necessarily true. So that means it's necessarily true that God exists
Okay.
objectively, therefore God exists necessarily.
Okay. Right. So just tell me if I've got this right. Okay. So for any x is mind independent or mind dependent, right? Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Mhm.
God is mind independent, so God refers to something that's mind independent. And then the reason to think
No,
that
you're
is
missing the other part. You're missing the other part. So for anything, it's either mind dependence or mind independence. God is a thing,
right.
right? So that'd be
Okay,
something
God's a
which
thing.
you agreed on also. Yeah, and so I established why it's logically impossible for God to be mind dependent. So P is just not sure. So that means it is the case that it collapses into the second disjunct of the dichotomy, which you agreed on to be sure.
Right. Well, why is God a thing? Well, I guess
You
actually it's more
conceded
important to
that God is
understand
a
what
thing.
God is.
You agree that God is a thing on the recording. So I don't know why you're going to
Okay.
go back.
What does
Backtrack.
thing mean?
I've already told you what the thing
I
is.
don't know. If a thing, okay, is a thing an existing token?
I told you that the thing is the type of, I told you that the thing is that with semantic content. And then I
Okay,
told you that
thing.
God would be a thing given its definition. Then you agreed on this. I don't know where you're tapping now this. You've already conceded the whole proposition. Like you
Because
agreed that
I'm
God was a thing
unclear
like
on the
several times in
entailment.
this conversation.
Sure,
How
but
can you
if
be
all
unclear
right, so
under
if
all this
thing
entailment? It's
because if
just
a
disjunct.
thing
You have a
is
true
something,
disjunction. Hold on. Hold on.
uh-huh,
Real quickly. You have a true disjunction, P or not P.
right,
Then we know that P is not sure. So that means not P is sure because you're going under a bivalent logic system.
right.
It's that simple. It's disjunctive elimination rule of inference, right? What are you talking about?
Well, no, that part is clear, but then the conclusion would be so. Okay, so God is a thing in that God is a semantic token, okay, or something with semantic content. Sorry. Okay, so then the
Like,
conclusion would be something like
yeah.
God, right? And then the only way I could see from that
All
conclusion
it
that you
means to
get
say
to
that God
God
refers
does
to
this,
something which is mind independent. All it means to say that God refers to something which is mind independent is that God is a mind independent thing. So, for example, Apollo the person refers to something mind independent that trivially entails and is semantically equivalent to the proposition that Apollo exists objectively.
uh-huh,
Like even just backtracking, like even like literally, you just backtracked on the proposition of God being a thing. You've already agreed on this. Like the debate's finished. Like I don't know why you're still going.
Apollo, you suck.
okay, so God refers to something mind independent, and that's just to say that God is mind independent, and something mind independent only if it exists. Okay, so I guess yeah, I mean for just take some like token X, right, and then say okay, were X to exist, my or X would be mind. Understand that, right? Were a unicorn to exist, the unicorn would not exist. Mind only would exist mind independently. And that sounds like what you're saying. Like that sounds what the conclusion is, not that God does in fact exist.
Agreed. By definition, mind independence is just existent objectively, right? So if you just agreed that you just did numerous times that it is logically impossible for God to be imaginary, fictional, or mind dependent, then it necessarily follows disjunctive elimination that God exists objectively. So God exists.
But so okay, so objective is just defined as something that exists.
Excuse me?
Objective just means something that exists and it's mind independent.
Not it doesn't. Yes, something which exists independently of minds. Yeah.
Right, okay. Well now why I
I
think that God is
don't see what the
objective.
confusion here is about. Like, I think personally, like the only
It sounds
way
like
you
just
could, I think
defining
the only
God
way,
as an
just
existing
real
thing.
quickly, go for it. Finish.
Uh-huh. I was just saying it sounds like you're just sort of defining God as an existing thing. And then I take issue with that, obviously. Unless you want to say that the criterion for God is to be objective or to exist is to refer or to be objective or something, and then God fulfills that, and then I don't see why you'd accept that.
Defining God as something. I'm saying my
Okay.
definition of God was pretty obvious. It was a first cause, an omnipotent being, which is omniscient. No parts of that
Right.
definition is me defining God into existence. It's just entailed from those properties
Right.
that he would necessarily exist. So, for example, I'll give you like one example, right? So,
Uh-huh.
if it is the case that I define a bachelor as an unmarried man, right? So if a bachelor is an unmarried man by definition, you could start an argument where the first premise is a mere definition and the conclusion is a deductive fact about the real world independently of the definition, right? Which would just follow from the definition. So, like, you could start off by saying, a bachelor is an unmarried man. Agent is an unmarried person who is a man. Therefore, agent is a bachelor. And in that deductive argument, the first premise is a argument, or so the first premise is a proposition, which is just a fact about the definition.
Right. Okay, so a bachelor is an unmarried man, an agent is an unmarried man. So are you saying that then exists some bachelor?
Yeah, so what I'm saying here simply, all I'm saying here simply that you can establish a definition of a word, and then you can use necessary facts about a different object to demonstrate why, necessarily speaking, that object satisfies the semantic conditions from that definition. The same logic applies here, right? So I have a specific
okay.
definition of what it means for some given being to be a thing, to be mind-dependent, to be mind-independent, to be omnipotent, omniscient, all of that stuff, right? And so given those definitions, I can just look at the conceptual facts about God and then make a metaphysical deduction that God didn't necessarily exist without defining them into existence directly, right?
Right. Well, okay, so what's the object? Okay, so in the bachelor example you said I'm the unmarried man. Is there like an object that you're picking at in the world that satisfies the conditions of being
That would be
omnipotent and
you, yeah, that
omniscient?
would be you.
Right, well,
Yeah,
no,
that's
no,
the
no, no,
second
sorry,
premise.
sorry. In that example, right? No, 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 I'm saying in the God case, are you picking out an object that's omnipotent and omniscient in the real world?
Yeah, I just explained it over and over, right? And how I'm picking out that object, how I'm going to determine that object's existence in the real world is just going to be based off a priori conceptual analysis, right? It's not going to be something which is empirically observed. In fact, if these was to be true, we would expect that we would not see empirical data which suggests that God exists directly.
Okay. So a priori, are you saying that a priori look at some object,
No, not that I locate an object, but that I deduce that an object exists, which is different. God is not located in like space-time dimensionality, so that's a category error.
okay, a priori a priori you deduce that omnipotent being, and then you just relate those conditions to God. Okay, so and then omnipotent and omniscient is just God. Well, yeah, okay. I mean that's clear to me, I guess. Okay, so you take some conditions for what it means to be God, omnipotent, omniscient, and then you deduce that there's an omnipotent and omniscient thing. Right. That's not the part that's unclear, right? But it sounds like whenever you use terms like it's objective or it's mind independent or like the term God refers to something that's mind independent or it refers to something that's objective, you assume the thing
No, it's not an assumption, right? All it means for something to be mind independent is that it refers to something independently of minds. So because you already conceded that God is mind independent as an object, then that means the term God, the thing God, refers to something mind independent, given your own concession.
Okay, and then so
It's
is
not begging
mind
the question because
independent defined?
it's not begging the question. It's not begging the question. It's just tautological, semantical equivalent. For it to say that something, or you have a mind independent thing, and for it to say that there's a thing which refers to something out there independently of minds. They're semantically equivalent. So it's like a tautology. Stop begging the question. It's like saying A equals A begs the question. It does not.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think that's where I'm getting caught up. So it sounds so okay. So is mind independent something where it's mind independent, like or God would be mind independent, or actually anything, right? So any X would be mind independent, where mind independent that exists, or is it something that's like if it were it to exist, right? Like were a unicorn to exist, it would be mind independent.
A necessary condition for something to be mind independent is for it to exist, but it's not a sufficient condition. The reason being that you can have things which exist which are not mind independent.
Well, yeah, I mean, Yeah, I understand.
This
Like
isn't
you
the
would
part you
also
should
have
be
to
worried
be
about.
independent of the mind, right?
Yeah, but this isn't the part of the argument you should be worried about, right? Like this is like irrelevant. Right.
I'm not sure. Well, I mean, this is just
What
where
you
I'm
have to
getting
do,
caught up.
I'll just give you, hold on. I'm not trying to be that guy, but I'll just give you like a small pro tip. The only way you could possibly debunk this argument. I don't think any person can debunk this argument. The only way you could possibly debunk this argument is for it to introduce a new formal ontological system or meta-ontology which rejects anti-monoganism or like some sort of like framework like that. But you already accepted that system. So you're literally just trapped in having to agree that God exists.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I'm not sure that. So, okay. God is mind independent, and the criterion for God to be mind independent is that God already does exist, and God is not mind independent because there's a
That's one of
contradiction
the
in
conditions.
terms.
That's just a necessary condition or criteria. It's not the sufficient condition.
Right. Right. But okay. So, whenever you say God is mind independent, you're showing that there's a contradiction. Were God to exist, He would not be mind independent, right?
So you've agreed on the recording that things necessarily exist, right? Like that was something you signed off. So you can't have a non-existent thing insofar as you can't have something which is neither mind dependent or mind independent. The definitions of
Right. I
mind
mean, that's
dependent
fine.
and mind independent, hold on. The definitions of mind dependent and mind independent are respectively something which exists in minds or dependently on minds, and something which exists independently of minds. So both horns of that dichotomy entails existing. And you agree that dichotomy is true.
Well, okay, yeah, but surely you're
Oh.
not trying to say that God exists mind dependently, right? I mean, that's obviously not right.
Of course.
But
But to be
okay,
clear on this,
God
I
Apollo.
think this. So shut up. I'm debating. Look, I'm going to wrap this up really quickly because I got to go pray. Okay, I think the debate's basically finished. But just to be clear, do you agree, yes or no, that's mind dependent? The thing is, mind dependent. It exists dependently in minds. So it exists and it's dependent in minds. Do you agree with this, right? Like
yeah,
imaginations,
sure.
desire. Okay,
Yeah, like
and you agree
representational
that something which
states.
is, and you agree
Sure.
that something which is mind independent is the type of thing which exists, but independently of minds.
I think you're right. So, mind independent thing. So, okay, so something is either mind independent or mind dependent. I think I can still
Well, I just
capture
want
what
like
I'm
a
thinking of.
yes or no to the question, right? So a thing is mind independent
Okay.
if it exists objectively, correct? That's like literally the
Um,
definition.
right. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so remember you agreed that the dichotomy of anything X in mind dependence or mind independence is sure. Then you
Mm-hmm.
agreed that God is a thing. Then you also agreed that God cannot be mind dependent. So then you'd have to agree via disjunctive elimination that God is a mind independent thing, and so God exists objectively. If you're gonna disagree that God is mind independent, then you'd have to reject the dichotomy being sure. But they've already conceded to the dichotomy being sure. And if the dichotomy is
Right.
true,
So,
hold on, just real quickly. The truth conditions of a disjunction,
um,
of any inclusive disjunction, is that at least one of the disjuncts is true, right? So if it is the case that neither of neither of the disjunctions are the disjuncts is true, right? Then it would be the case that the disjunction is false. But you agree the disjunction is true. You agree the dichotomy is true. So you'd have to agree that one of the disjuncts is true. And since you already agreed that the disjunct of God being mind dependent is logically impossible, then you'd have to agree that God being mind independent, which entails him existent, is logically necessary.
yeah. So, right. God is when you say God is and that bakes in existence. I understand when you're trying to prove that point through contradiction, because were God to exist, He wouldn't be the sort of thing that is mind independent, right? Okay, so that's clear. But then you jump from just what God is referring to just God at all, right? Just God as a thing, as a semantic
Look, you're
token.
focusing on the non-points, right? Remember, you agree that by definition, for anything which is mind dependent or mind independent, it exists, whether fictionally or non-fictionally. If you agree that this is necessarily true as a dichotomy via the LEM, and you also agree that God cannot be mind dependent, then you'd have to agree that God is mind dependent. In your own definite dependent, which is something which exists objectively, then you'd have to agree that God exists objectively. So God exists. The debate is finished.
Right,
There's
yeah,
an
I mean,
argument.
I still take it that, so I could accept
It's the
psychology
simplest
and then
argument,
take
but
it
it's the
that
most lethal
God.
argument out there.
Yeah, so I still think that I can take it as God as a semantic token is mind dependent, and refers to something that exists as a mind dependent token, like a unicorn or any other mythological creature, and also
I've
accept
already
that
told you
were
that you
God to
cannot. I'm
exist
already
in a
told
mind
that those.
independent way.
The definition of unicorn does not entail it existing objectively, because the definition of unicorn is compatible with it being mind dependent. And if you're going to say that it exists, if you're going to bake into the definition that it is mind independent, that's be a carrot, because mind independence and mind dependent is the types of things which are compatible with definitions. They're metaphysical propositions, which you deduce from and now analyzing the relevant data from the conceptual assessment of a given concept. So that
Yeah, I mean,
argument doesn't
okay,
work
so
either. Look, agent. Just to be clear, because I'm going to go pray real quickly. I've already anticipated all of these objections. Like I know he's like this is not unique. I know you'd have given this objection. It just doesn't work.
yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know what to do whenever you repeat that over and over. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, okay, so I guess
Well, you don't know what to do, irrespective of whether repeat that. So.
here's maybe an intuition pump, right? Okay, so take it that I define Shmad as, I don't know, like a uniquely omnipotent and not omniscient thing, right? Okay, and then it follows from the definition of Shmad that he's not mind dependent,
That's a
right? Because an
contradiction.
omnipotent thing, a mind.
Yeah, this is just a
Sorry.
contradiction. Yeah, it's
Oh,
more.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a
it's a
contradiction
contradiction in the
because
same
of
way that
so
you
so
gave,
you
right?
so you can see that God so you can see there's an omnipotent being exists. I'm not going to want to ask the argument for being omniscient. That's pretty simple, right? So
Well, no,
more
but
than
if it's a
solvent.
uniquely so right, I mean, if you define God as an omnipotent and omniscient thing, and this thing is not omniscient, but Shmad exists
But
and it's uniquely
I don't
omnipotent,
know
then
if
it
in
follows
these
that
low tier
God
semantic
exists.
word games there's going to be a proper objection to my arguments, right? Like it's pretty obvious. Like
I
if you
think
have
this
like a
argument is a
uniquely omnipotent
semantic
thing.
word game.
No, I'm saying your objections are low tier, right? So all I'm saying here is simply that if you're going to say, okay, you have Shmuel, for example, which is a uniquely omnipotent thing, which is not omniscient, right? That's just a
Sure.
contradiction given the real world facts, right? Because given the real world facts, it is far more expected under the hypothesis of something being omnipotent that it would be necessarily omniscient.
Wait, but okay, so maybe it's less plausible, right, or less likely, or something, or it's less expected. But it just follows logically, given your formal ontology, that Shema does exist.
No, it doesn't.
Well, wait, okay, so I guess
Because
let me
there's a
just ask you the
contradiction.
same
There's a
questions.
contradiction. No, because there's a contradiction in there being more than one first causes. That's logically contradictory given my conceptual analysis.
Wait, but
So that means
if it's uniquely omnipotent, then it's only first cause. There's not another first
if
cause.
it's uniquely omnipotent, then it would be the case that if you're going to say that being exists, but at the same time the being of an omnipotent, omniscient being exists, there would be a contradiction. And the reason why there would be a contradiction is
Wait, but if
because
you're committed
an
to that,
omnipotent.
then
I'm still talking. I'm still talking. I'm
okay,
still talking. The reason
sure.
the contradiction is because an omnipotent being is ontologically independent, meaning that it is not going to be the types of things which is asymmetrically dependent on metaphysical properties like that. And if it's the case that there are two beings like that, the differentiating property between these two beings, by definition, would contradict it being ontologically independent. So that means it
All right,
leaves
so
you
I guess
open to just agree that one of these two beings exists. And the evidence favors
uh,
my being existent than your being. So that doesn't
so
work.
wait, what's the evidence that favors your being existing? Because it sounds like you'd be
That's
logic. So
easy.
it sounds
Here's
like
the
it's
evidence.
logically
Yeah, here's
entailed.
the evidence, right?
Okay,
Here's the evidence. Gotta go soon. Premise one: if something has limited knowledge, then it is ontologically dependent. Premise two: God, by definition, is not ontologically dependent. Conclusion: God does not have limited knowledge. That's just modus tollens. First premise is justified by a strong, large pool of inductive data, right? So think of like a rock, or your phone, or you yourself, any ontologically dependent object, which is basically the entirety of this universe. Right? All of these objects have limited knowledge, right? And all of these objects at the same time are ontologically dependent. So the first premise is a material implication, which is inductively justified. The second premise is justified by definition of God. So necessarily, it is the case that God has unlimited knowledge. Is P implies Q, not Q, therefore not P. P implies Q justified inductively, therefore God is omniscience.
wait,
GG's.
but you can be inductively confident in premise one, but it just logically follows mod would also exist in the same way that God exists, given your so
You're
you'd
not
be
tracking,
committed to
right?
both of
There's a
those.
logical contradiction
Well, no,
in Shmuel
do you
existing and
agree?
God
Just
existing
real quick.
simultaneously. Wait, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on,
Do you agree
hold
that
on.
induction? I think this is pretty important. Do you
Your
agree that
tracking disability is
induction?
kind of like pissing me off,
Oh
right?
my
So
god.
it's like pretty simple, right? Shmuel existing and God existing at the same time is contradictory. That means
Okay,
that
right.
you have to evaluate the evidence to see which one actually exists. Okay, I've already told you that would be logically contradictory. Right. So given that specifically, which I've already established, if the evidence favors the hypothesis of God existence, then the evidence favors the hypothesis of Shmuel not existing. And so it would not be the case that Shmuel exists, even if you try to play semantic word games and define Shmuel into existence, as you like to
Right.
call it.
So, right. I mean, I agree that it's logically contradictory, but I think that you would be committed to given the same, given it's logically valid. Right. So you just
No,
say the same thing before. So for any x is mind independent or mind dependent. Right. Okay. So is
no,
mind
it doesn't.
independent given the definition? What?
No, it doesn't. Right.
But you disagree with premise one?
I'm saying that my argument does not commit me to believing that it would be the case that Shmuel exists.
Are you talking about the former argument they gave? That sure. Just using the same premises
I'm
and
saying
replacing
neither
God
of
with
the
Shema.
arguments. I'm saying neither of the arguments. I'm saying neither of the arguments commits me to that claim. Right?
Well, but I'm just using the same premises and then filling in God for Shmad.
You understand that if you're using that specifically, not only are you inevitably conceded that God exists, but also given the evidence of given a while ago, it would be the case that it is more likely to be true that God exists, which would just be a probabilistic deduction about what is logically necessarily true, right? So the evidence favors that being necessarily true over it being the case that it would favor both entities existing, right?
Well, if it's logically necessary from the same premises same as before that there's a logical contradiction, that shows a flaw in one of the premises. Unless you
No, it doesn't.
disagree with proof by contradiction.
Because you're
What?
basically ignoring the other piece of data, which would be evidence against Shmuel existence. I've already given the evidence with the first cause incompatibility stuff.
Right. If it's logically necessary for something to be the case, given a set of premises and a valid inference, then it's not like, oh, is it likely the case? If it's like likely that it's not the case, I mean, surely you would understand that giving
You're,
evidence for
you're
something being
conflating epistemic
likely.
modality with you're conflating epistemic modality with logical modality, right? So you can have like a system where you probabilistically deduce that something is logically necessary, concede to the epistemic possibility of it being false, and at the same time agree that it is the case that something is still logically necessary given the evidence. I
Right.
gotta go pray
Okay.
right now,
But if it's
anyways.
logically necessary,
Let's
then
just save
it's
the recording
true.
for now because I gotta go pray right now, like literally. So yeah, we can just continue this. Just save
All
this.
right. I mean, just
Good topic.
shoot me a